The first thing I saw when I opened my blinds that Saturday morning was a 30-foot yacht bobbing in the water like it had been dropped there by a helicopter. It wasn't mine. It sure as hell didn't belong to any of my neighbors either. But it was parked right in front of my lakefront dock like it owned the place. I set down my coffee and marched outside in my slippers, already knowing who was behind this. Only one person in our HOA had the gall to treat a public lake like her personal marina. "Morning, Sebastian," came that familiar nasal voice from behind the hedge. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Francine O'Doyle, president of the Lakewood Pines HOA, destroyer of joy, and self-declared queen of the shoreline. She strutted out in a stiff floral blouse, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard like always. The yacht glittered behind her like a smug middle finger. "What the hell is that?" I asked, pointing at the floating monstrosity. Francine gave a breathy laugh as if we were sharing some joke. "Oh, it's my cousin's. He's visiting for a few weeks and he needed a place to park it. It's a public lake, Sebastian. You don't own the water." "No, but I own this dock," I said. "And it's tied to my cleats." "Temporary mooring," she said, waving her hand like she had some kind of marine law degree. "Totally legal under HOA guidelines. Section 4, Article 7, shared community water access must remain available to guests and residents." I crossed my arms. "There's nothing in the rules about tying a yacht to someone else's private dock without permission." "Well, we'll just have to clear that up at the next board meeting," she said, and with that, she turned around like the conversation was over. Now, I could have gone the usual route: complaints, passive-aggressive notes, maybe even a lawyer. But Francine had been pushing the whole neighborhood around for 2 years. She once fined a guy for planting tomatoes in his side yard. She had a couple fined for a non-compliant mailbox painted navy instead of slate blue, and she tried to have my backyard fire pit removed for being too rustic. I was done playing fair. So I walked down to the dock, checked the ropes tying the yacht to my cleats, and added something of my own: a laminated sign bolted directly onto the post. "Private dock unauthorized vessels will incur docking fees, $500 per DAY." Then I took photos, lots of them. I started a folder, date stamped. Time stamped. Sent a copy to my email and printed another for my records. By Monday morning, I had already filed a formal invoice with the HOA. Docking fees, $1,000 and counting. Francine showed up steaming. "You have no authority to charge fees," she snapped, waving a printout of some outdated map of the lake. "You tied a yacht to my dock," I said calmly. "That's private property. If your cousin wants to avoid further charges, I suggest he moves it before tomorrow." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, and for once she didn't have a snappy comeback. Just a glare. A deep, furious glare that told me she was already plotting something, but so was I, because that yacht. It was just the beginning. By Wednesday, the yacht was still there, gently bobbing in place like a bloated prize someone refused to claim. The laminated invoice I'd taped to the dock post had mysteriously disappeared, but I'd expected that. I'd made 3 more and bolted them on with stainless steel screws. They weren't going anywhere. That evening I received a letter, not in the mail, slipped under my door. It was HOA stationery, of course. The language was classic Francine, overly formal, vaguely threatening, and riddled with jargon that didn't actually mean anything. She claimed that my unauthorized signage violated aesthetic uniformity standards and demanded immediate removal, or I'd face a non-compliance fine of $200 per day. I didn't respond. Instead, I went online and pulled the county property records for my lot. I found the official plat map, highlighted the property lines, and printed it out. It clearly showed the dock well within my parcel. Just for fun, I added a sticky note. Attached, legal ownership of dock. Signage compliant with private asset enforcement. I mailed it to the HOA office with a copy to the county zoning board. 2 days later, something strange happened. A contractor van pulled up and parked across the street. 3 guys got out with measuring wheels, orange flags and clipboards. They didn't knock. They just started walking the perimeter of my yard, taking notes. I stepped outside, pulled my phone out, and hit record. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. One of them, a thin guy with a patchy beard and a reflective vest, looked up. "We're conducting a boundary assessment. On whose authority?" HOA requested it. "Said there's a dispute over property lines." I nodded slowly. "You've got paperwork confirming that," he hesitated. "We were told it was routine." "Routine would involve notifying the homeowner first," I said. "You're on private property. You can either show me written authorization or I'll call the sheriff." The guy muttered something to his coworker and they started packing up. I kept filming until they drove off. That night, I called up an old friend from college, Marcy. She was a real estate attorney now, worked downtown. I told her what was going on. "They sent surveyors without your consent," she asked. "That's a violation. If they crossed onto your land, that's trespassing, especially if no official dispute was filed." I thought so. "What's my move?" "First, file a notice of unauthorized entry with the county. Then send a cease and desist to the HOA. I'll draft it for you. If they step wrong again, we'll escalate." The cease and desist was sent the next morning, certified mail, signature required, but Francine wasn't done. The following weekend, I noticed something different when I went out to mow the lawn. A small white post had been installed at the edge of my yard near the dock path. It looked like a utility marker until I got closer. It was a GPS stake. New, shiny. Wired to a small transmitter box buried under a pile of mulch. I dug it up, took photos, and called the county assessor's office. They had no record of any new installations on my property. "You're saying someone installed an unpermitted GPS marker on private land?" the clerk asked. "That's right. Send us the photos. We'll launch an investigation." By Tuesday, a county inspector had visited my property. He confirmed the marker was unauthorized and likely part of a private land survey. He removed the transmitter and took it with him, said it was evidence. Later that day, I received a visit not from Francine, but from her cousin, the yacht owner. He was in his late 50s, sunburnt, wearing a loud Hawaiian shirt and mirrored sunglasses. He strutted up my driveway like he'd just come from a Jimmy Buffett concert. "You the one trying to bill me for docking?" he asked. I didn't look up from the rake I was holding. "That's correct." He let out a dry laugh. "You're not gonna see a dime, pal. This whole lake is community property. You don't own the water." "No," I said. "But I own the structure your boat's tied to. You're trespassing. You're bluffing. I've already filed a lien notice. If you don't pay, I'll escalate to small claims court. And since your yacht is physically tied to my dock, that gives me legal standing." He stepped closer. "You think I'm scared of some paperwork? I've got friends on the board." "That explains the unauthorized survey then." He blinked. "Yeah," I said. "That little transmitter you buried, the county's investigating it as a potential zoning violation." "They're not happy." The man shifted his weight, clearly less confident now. "Look, let's be reasonable. You've got until tomorrow evening to move that boat. After that, I file for impound authorization. You can't impound a yacht. Watch me." He left without another word. The next morning, the yacht was still there, but something else had changed. My neighbor, Mr. Kwon, came over holding a manila envelope. He was usually quiet, kept to himself. "I got this from the HOA," he said. "You might want to see it." Inside were copies of emails, internal communications. Apparently, someone on the board had accidentally copied Mr. Kwon on a thread meant for just board members. The emails discussed reclaiming dock space for shared lake access improvements. They included phrases like force a compliance violation and pressure through zoning ambiguity. One line from Francine herself read, "If we can trigger a few infractions and survey discrepancies, we'll have grounds to revoke dock access and reclassify shoreline usage." I stared at the printouts. They weren't just being petty, they were trying to steal my dock. That night, I drove to the county sheriff's office with the documents, my photos, and a USB drive full of video recordings, legal filings, and voice memos. I met with a deputy named Marla who listened carefully and took notes. "This isn't just a zoning issue," she said. "You've got evidence of coordinated harassment, attempted property interference, and possible fraud. Can you do anything? We can open an investigation. And I'll forward everything to the district attorney's office. If your HOA has been forging documents or misrepresenting authority, that's criminal." By the end of the week, things moved fast. The county issued a stop work order on any HOA-related zoning activity around the lake. Francine was served with a court summons for abuse of authority and trespass conspiracy. Her cousin was fined by the Marine Unit for unauthorized mooring and had to pay damages or risk asset seizure. The yacht, it was gone by sunrise Saturday. Hauled out by a tow crew after the sheriff's office taped off the dock. And the best part, the HOA was now under audit, their finances, their communications, their past 6 years of fines and approvals. Everything. Turns out I wasn't the only one they'd targeted. But I was the first to fight back with a paper trail. And I wasn't done yet. A week after the yacht vanished and the audit was announced, the neighborhood no longer whispered, they talked openly. Lawn conversations turned into impromptu gatherings. People who had barely nodded at each other before were now sharing screenshots, printing out bylaws and trading stories about threats and fines they'd once kept quiet about. I hadn't expected to become a rallying point, but that's exactly what happened. When I stepped outside to grab the paper one morning, there were 3 neighbors waiting by the sidewalk. One of them, a retired school principal named Marlene, clutched a thick binder. "I've been compiling everything," she said, flipping it open. "They tried to suspend my voting rights last year when I questioned the landscaping budget, claimed I hadn't paid dues on time, but look," she tapped a bank receipt cleared 3 days early. Another neighbor, a single dad named Lucas, held up his phone. "They told me my security cameras were a privacy violation, tried to fine me $500. I pulled footage from the week before they were on my property measuring my porch with a tape. And I got a letter saying my fence was non-harmonious," said the third, an ER nurse named Tanya. "Funny thing is, it matches the one in the HOA's own promotional brochure." I opened my door and gestured them inside. "Come in, let's get organized." By that evening, my dining room table was buried under a sea of documents. We divided them into piles: fines, threats, surveillance, forged notices, and unapproved surveillance. What started as a personal battle had now become a full-blown investigation into systemic abuse. The next day, I reached out to the district attorney's office and requested a formal meeting. They agreed. I brought the binder, the video clips, and the stack of mismatched letters. The deputy DA, a no-nonsense woman named Kira, listened carefully. She didn't interrupt once. When I was done, she leaned back and tapped her pen on the table. "This goes beyond zoning," she said. "There's a pattern of coercion, document falsification, and possible embezzlement. If we can verify the financial irregularities through the audit, we're looking at felony charges." "What's the next move?" I asked. "We'll need sworn statements from every affected homeowner. And if you can get someone from inside the board willing to talk, that'll blow this wide open." That night, I called Marcy again. She helped me draft a public letter addressed to the entire HOA membership. We distributed it to every mailbox by sunrise. It didn't make accusations, it asked questions. It included contact information for the DA's office and invited residents to a town hall at my place the following weekend. We expected maybe 20 people. Over 80 showed up. Lawn chairs covered the backyard. People leaned against fences, stood on the patio steps, and filled the fire pit area. I set up a mic and speaker system borrowed from the local VFW. I kept it short. "This isn't about one boat," I said. "This is about intimidation, misuse of power, and the theft of our rights as homeowners. If you've ever been fined, inspected, or threatened without explanation, now's the time to speak." Hands went up. Stories poured out: unauthorized home entries, fake fee notices, sudden lien threats. One man, a veteran named Jorge, revealed that he had been served with a violation letter for unauthorized flag display after hanging an American flag on his porch. He had the original complaint signed by Francine herself. When it ended, we had over 50 sworn statements and a waiting list for the next collection day. 2 days later, Francine made her move. A notice appeared on every door. It claimed that my home was now under emergency compliance review and would be subject to daily inspections for unauthorized gatherings. It even included a veiled threat to suspend my voting privileges and restrict access to HOA-maintained paths. That was a mistake. I took the letter directly to Kira. She didn't even blink before calling in a judge. By Friday morning, a temporary restraining order was issued against Francine and 2 other board members. They were prohibited from entering anyone's property or issuing any enforcement actions until the investigation concluded. But the real bombshell dropped the following week. The audit team uncovered a second set of financial records stored on a flash drive found in the locked drawer of the HOA treasurer's desk. It showed thousands of dollars in consulting fees paid to shell companies traced back to Francine's cousin, the yacht owner. The payments had been funneled through fake landscaping contracts and community improvement studies. The biggest payout, $28,000 labeled as shoreline restoration research. I got the call from Marcy first. They're going to indict, she said. Wire fraud, misuse of funds, racketeering. This just became a criminal case. By the end of the month, Francine was arrested outside her favorite cafe wearing a pink scarf and sunglasses like she was trying to dodge paparazzi. The DA's office released a statement confirming that charges had been filed against 3 HOA board members. One agreed to cooperate immediately, the treasurer. The trial was set to begin in early fall. But the fallout had already begun. A special election was ordered to replace the entire board. I didn't run, but Marlene did. So did Tanya. And so did a former HOA president who had resigned years ago under suspicious circumstances. He finally revealed that he'd left after finding out Francine had falsified a vote to secure her position. The new board was elected unanimously. Their first act: nullify every fine issued under the previous administration pending review and suspend all enforcement actions. The second: open the archives. Within weeks, they found evidence that the old board had been forging signatures on meeting minutes, issuing fake approvals for home modification requests, and even tampering with voting tallies during elections. Every homeowner who had been fined, threatened, or forced into compliance was now eligible for restitution. Francine's cousin, meanwhile, had skipped town, but his yacht didn't. It was impounded by the county for unpaid mooring fines that I had documented, submitted, and testified about in court. It sold at auction for just under $18,000. That money went straight into a new community fund dedicated to legal education, public audits, and homeowner rights workshops. And the best part, the dock, still mine. Only now it was better than ever. The new board approved a grant to restore it, extend it, and install proper signage, official signage. Laminated, embossed, and stamped with the HOA's new seal. Private dock, no unauthorized mooring, $500 per day minimum. I didn't put that up out of spite. I put it up as a reminder. Power doesn't belong to the loudest person with a clipboard. It belongs to the people who know the rules and have the spine to enforce them when no one else will. And as for Francine, her trial date was set for early October. She faced 8 felony charges and a mountain of civil suits, but she never came back to Lakewood Pines. Her house went up for sale quietly, the listing stripped of any mention of exclusive lake privileges. Funny how fast a kingdom falls when it's built on fake fines and forged minutes. And me? I still drink my coffee on the dock every morning. No yachts, no cousins. Just the quiet lapping of water, and the knowledge that sometimes the only way to get change is to anchor it in place and charge rent until the tide turns. The morning of the pretrial hearing, I stood outside the courthouse watching a pair of pigeons circle the clock tower. The air was thick with the scent of roasted peanuts from a vendor cart half a block down, and the distant hum of city traffic underscored the tension like a low drum roll. I wasn't required to be there, but I came anyway. After everything, I needed to watch the facade crack from the inside. Francine arrived nearly 40 minutes late, escorted by an attorney who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He barely glanced at me as they passed. Francine, on the other hand, did. She didn't speak, didn't gesture, just looked. A tired, hollow stare. The kind you give someone you know you lost to, but still haven't figured out how. Inside, I took a seat in the back of the courtroom. The judge, a sharp-tongued woman named Lydia Cross, wasted no time. No grand speeches, no delays. The prosecution laid out the charges succinctly: wire fraud, falsification of public documents, misappropriation of HOA funds, and obstruction of government zoning inspections. The last one caught my attention. That hadn't been part of the original filings. During the recess, I approached Deputy DA Kira in the hallway. "You added obstruction," she nodded. Turns out Francine interfered with a county environmental survey last year, removed their markers, and filed a false complaint that they were trespassing. It stalled a shoreline restoration project for 3 months. Why would she do that? She didn't want any documentation showing erosion near the dock zone. Would have made her shoreline improvement invoices look redundant. I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say. Back in Lakewood Pines, the new board had been busy. Marlene, now acting president, had commissioned an independent audit firm to go further back 10 years, not just 6. They found records missing from an entire fiscal quarter. When pressed, the previous treasurer admitted they'd been shredded after Francine insisted they weren't relevant anymore. Meanwhile, the community fund had grown fast. Donations poured in not just from residents, but from nearby neighborhoods who'd heard what happened and wanted to ensure it never happened to them. The new board hired a full-time compliance officer licensed, rotating shifts, no HOA members involved. Transparency became policy, not a buzzword. But something still didn't sit right with me. One night, flipping through archived meeting notes, I noticed a curious footnote. Dock access variance granted for Lot 14 per special vote. Lot 14 was 2 doors down from mine. The owner, a retired engineer named Vince, had moved out 3 years ago. But the variance? It had been signed off after he left. I knocked on his door anyway. A teenage girl answered his granddaughter. "He's in town for the week," she said, and called him out. Vince recognized me instantly. "You're the guy with the yacht situation," he said, shaking my hand. "Do you remember ever requesting a dock variance?" I asked. "Nope," he said. "Never needed it. My lot's too narrow." "Why?" I showed him the photocopy. He stared at it. "That's not my signature," he said flatly. I took a photo of his ID beside the document for verification. Then I emailed it to Kira. The next morning I got a call. "We had a feeling there were forged approvals," she said. "This confirms it. We'll open a supplemental case. Good catch." 2 weeks later, Francine's plea hearing arrived. Her attorney tried to negotiate a lesser charge, restitution, community service. The DA rejected it. Too much damage, too many victims. The case was set for trial, but Francine cracked before it began. She accepted a reduced sentence in exchange for identifying every accomplice, every manipulated vote, every fraudulent document. That's how we learned about the server. Buried in the basement of the HOA office behind a false wall, no less, was a dedicated system used exclusively by the board's inner circle. On it were unredacted versions of every letter they'd sent, draft fine notices with optional exaggerations noted in comments, and dozens of email chains discussing how to manufacture compliance issues for residents they didn't like. There was even a list. A literal target list, ranking homeowners by how easily they could be pressured into paying. I was number 3. Number 1 had moved out last year after being fined over 38 times in under 12 months, all of them baseless. The police seized the server. The news hit local stations the next day. Suddenly, Lakewood Pines wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a headline. The County Board of Supervisors stepped in. They released a statement condemning the abuse and began drafting new oversight legislation for HOAs across the region. Mandatory audits, restricted powers, and a hotline for anonymous complaints. At the public hearing, I testified beside Marlene and Jorge. We each spoke for 5 minutes. Mine ended with this: power without accountability isn't just dangerous. It's theft with paperwork. The legislation passed unanimously back home. The neighborhood kept changing. Fences previously flagged for height were approved. The harmonious color palette policy was repealed. Tanya painted her door dark red and no one said a word. Kids started playing in front yards again, skateboards, chalk drawings, even a lemonade stand set up by the Quan kids. No fines, no warnings. I got a letter from the new board one afternoon. It wasn't a notice. It was an invitation. They wanted to name the dock after me. Not necessary, I said when Marlene brought it up. I didn't do it for recognition. You didn't, she replied, but you proved something. That quiet doesn't mean helpless. That's worth remembering. So they compromised. A small plaque at the base, mahogany brass lettering, nothing flashy. In memory of civic courage, and the dock that held the line. As for Francine, she served 18 months at a low-security facility outside the city. Her sentence included a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board statewide. Upon release, she moved in with a relative in another county. No one from Lakewood Pines ever heard from her again. The yacht, auctioned off months earlier, was tracked down by a local journalist doing a follow-up piece. It now belonged to a marina rental company that gave lake tours to tourists. They repainted it turquoise and renamed it the Honest Current. I laughed when I read that. Marlene still runs the board, but she rotates leadership every 12 months. No one stays longer than a year. That was her idea. Powers alone, she said. Time to treat it that way. Sometimes I still sit out on the dock with my coffee. Not every morning life gets busy, but often enough. The lake's quieter these days. No yachts, no arguments, just the occasional ripple of a canoe or the laughter of someone who finally feels at home without looking over their shoulder. And the dock, it's still mine. But now, it stands for everyone.